Do you guys remember the alternate ending to this movie? For years I thought I was crazy, but thankfully for the internet, we have now the resources to prove that I'm not fucked in the head. There is a scene in this movie, and by the way, this is my favorite Child's Play movie of all time. There is an alternate ending that I remember about the factory restoring Chucky, and the facial structure of Chucky starts to smile. Now this would be rehashed and used in the opening credits of the third one, which I honestly believe they do better in the third one, but based throughout my research, I'm just really glad I got that clarity and that nostalgia of when I first watched this as a kid and I saw that scene on TV for the first time. So Don Mancini and Tom Holland made a banger of a movie in 1988. It was a box office hit, the studio made money, they wanted to make a sequel. Now Tom Holland was not set to return this movie. Instead, they brought in John LaFia, the guy who they refused in the first film, to come back and direct this movie. And it's like the old saying goes, it's one thing getting there, it's one thing to stay there. In 1990, they still had some pretty big names to run up against. Within that same year, they released Stephen King's It, the miniseries, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, Arachnophobia, Tremors, Misery, man I love Misery, The Exorcist 3, Gremlins 2, Predator 2, and the list goes on and on and on. One thing I love about this sequel is how character driven it is when it comes to Andy's story. It follows Andy going into these foster homes because his mother Karen had been institutionalized for backing up Andy's story. The only major change they made to this movie before going into production is that Karen Barkley and Detective Mike was set to reprise their roles. They were supposed to come back in this film in some sort of capacity. But of course all that was stripped away. The introduction of Kyle, Chucky playing cat and mouse with everybody, just having a lot of fun in this. But if you guys are ready, let's get into these kills. There are 8 kills in this film, and coming in on my number 1 is Chucky's death. Chucky has died a lot in this series. The feature films, the TV series, but I do believe this is the greatest Chucky death of all time, and it's gonna be fucking hard to top this. Because the Predator sense and the intensity of this ending with Chucky. Chucky gets his ass beat. He gets his hand cut off. He sticks that blade into his cut off hand, and he is still crawling after Andy. He gets his fucking leg chopped off, and he's using this cart with one hand to sit there and try to kill fucking Andy. How gangsta is this motherfucker? And on top of all that, he gets nearly melted with that liquid, but that doesn't stop him. He still comes back again. And finally they close it all off with the hose in the mouth, his face fucking expanding, and then he blows up. Greatest Chucky death of all time, probably my favorite moment in the entire franchise. Coming in at my number 2 is Mrs. Kettlewell's death. Her death is definitely entertaining, but it's also kind of embarrassing in a comedic way. It's all fun and games with her looking in the closet and getting surprise attacked by Chucky, right? Getting stabbed with that what I'm assuming is a fucking air pump. But to be chased down by this fucking doll, this good guy doll, and being beaten to death with a fucking yardstick. A yardstick. Could you imagine the amount of times this bitch had to been hit to die from a fucking yardstick? And that window shot really sells it for me right here. Like, it really does. I feel like this movie has a perfect mixture of suspense and comedy. I guess Miss Kettlewell got the shit in of the stick. Coming in on my number 3 is Phil's death. Phil Simpson being, of course, Andy Barkley's foster dad. The scene right here alone has one of my most Chucky quoted lines. It's just as simple as,
"How's it hanging, Phil?"
If you take his death in face value, not a whole lot happens. But for me, it's the build up on what happens. Chucky tripping him down on the steps and him hanging there, Phil. And Chucky just being nonchalant, because at this point, I feel like Chucky's just done with the bullshit. He's just like, how's it hanging, Phil? It's time to die. He's no longer hiding in the teacher's closets. He's out for blood. And just for his own satisfaction, he drops that one-liner to Phil. And then he sweeps that leg and then Phil goes, keep. Also, his neck breaking is like, fuck, that sucks. Coming in at my number 4 is Grace Poole's death. Grace to me has the most vicious death in here. It's quick, it's swift, but it's just a fucking knife penetrating her chest. It's something severe, something gruesome. There's definitely a sense of brutality in Chucky's actions in Grace's death. And to top it all off, her being brutally stabbed and then falling down onto the copy machine, and then she has copies of her fucking dying body, screaming body there. Pretty top-notch stuff. But there's a reason Grace's death is above these other 4. Again, it's just a sheer brutality for me. If you watch this scene over and over, compared to everybody else getting stabbed, there's something really raw and brutal about the way Chucky took Grace out. Coming in at my number 5 is Joanne's death. Now, of these 8 deaths in this film, I feel like this one is the most interesting. Not the most entertaining, but the most interesting. Because of the sure fact that yes, it did happen off screen, you don't have much to work with. She's turned around in the chair, she's gagged, she's got her throat slit, but there is an art of killing people on screen. But there's also an art of having the audience having to guess and leave up people's death to their imagination. I feel like that's an art as well. I can only imagine what Joanne had to go through, because if she's gagged up, you know that's not an immediate kill. Chucky gagged her up, they had some conversation going on. And again, it's up to the audience's imagination to find out what that was. Was Chucky doing it just to get himself off, so he can feel empowered? Did he do it to get information out of her? Was it a combination of both? Or was he just doing it for the fucking sport of it? And then after he was done, maybe he was like, okay, cool, dead. Coming in on my number 6 is Matson's death. As much as I love this movie, I find Matson's death kind of underwhelming. His interaction with Chucky is entertaining nonetheless, and there is some comedic relief, especially when he's got the gun, it's just a toy gun, he's like, bang, and it's just water. The kill itself is nice, the suffocation, especially since his hands are tied behind his back and there's nothing he can do about it. But from all of these kills thus far, I feel like they could have added another element to his death. It could have been a stab, it could have been a punch to the face, something just to spice it up. And again, not every death in a horror movie has to have these great graphics or be like mind-blowing. A simple death can work in the right context. But compared to some of the shit that happens in this movie, this is definitely kind of lackluster. And some of the more interesting kills that happens in the heat of the moment. Chucky had all the time in the world with Matson right here, and he was just getting started back up on his killing spree. But the kill is enjoyable, I just feel like they really missed an opportunity with this one here. Coming in at number 7 is the eye technician, the opening kill of the movie. Having Chucky come back with electricity is kind of played out in the horror trope, even in the fucking 80s and 90s already. But it makes sense, at least you had some factory equipment that could have malfunctioned or something to bring Chucky back to life. And if you wanted to, you could throw a little bit of that Damballa black magic voodoo in there, and it would make sense. I can't give enough praise to Kevin Yeager for these practical effects in this movie. The practical effects are amazing. Him getting electrocuted, then him being thrown across the room was cool, but him screaming busted through that window, in reality, he would have been dead before he even hit the ground. But at the end of the day, it's something I can overlook. It's not that big of a deal. As an opening kill, I feel like it still serves justice to the movie. Coming in at my number 8, my very last entry. My least favorite kill of the movie is the other technician that dies at the end. This kill in particular is definitely a spare of the moment death. Chucky just slashes his cheek, he falls on the conveyor belt, and he gets the doll eyes in his eyeballs. It's cool to see, sure, but for one, he shouldn't have been in that assembly line doing that anyway. You ever heard of fucking OSHA regulations? This ending scene being so intense and climactic as it is anyway, especially Chucky chasing Kyle and Andy, I feel like you could have took this scene out completely and it wouldn't have changed the movie whatsoever. I'm still glad we got it. It's entertaining. I just felt like this one in particular wasn't needed. This kill is the only kill in the film and it's kind of like, I sneeze at it a little bit. That man should have stayed home for the day. But that's gonna wrap this video up, guys. Thank you so much for taking part in your day to kick it with me. You know I appreciate it. I can't wait to see you in the next one, Child's Play 3, the kill ranking. I love all you guys. Till next time, adios.